There we go. Okay, good. All set. So I'm really thrilled to be here, and I'm glad that we're getting so many people that are interested in this great topic. I known Ashley for a while, and when she was telling me about that she is, this branding strategist going through a rebranding, I said, you have to do a workshop. When the cobbler gets new shoes, that's when you want to talk to them. So I'm thrilled to have Ashley Muir here, who's the principal and creative director at Now Wildfire. She began her career designing typefaces internationally and contributing her skills to custom typeface designs for brands such as Giant Bikes, Merrill Shoes, Disney and Microsoft, while contributing to the creation of nearly 30 typefaces. In 2012, she was the youngest member appointed to the board of Sisters U, a local nonprofit with the mission to provide education resources for women that empowers them to give back to their local communities. And her branding capabilities really allowed that organization to more than double their size of their membership in just 2 short years. Then from that success, she launched Intellitivity in 2023 and has contributed to the development and navigation of over 50 brands nationwide. And now she's Wildfire. And we're so thrilled to have her here sharing her knowledge and expertise with us today. And she said the last couple of minutes, she is going to reserve for questions, but Shannon will moderate that. And so if you have any questions that are coming up while she's talking, just continue to just write them in the chat and we'll save them for the end. And then she might even be able to stay a few more minutes after to answer any questions that weren't addressed. So Ashley, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, for that incredible introduction. I think you did such a great job introducing me that I don't really have to say too much about myself. So what I'll do now is let's head to the deck. And we'll go from there. Ooh. Okay, so I'm just going to have Shannon go ahead and welcome everyone to the presentation. Shannon?
Thank you so much, Ashley. My name is Shannon Carter. I am a project manager for Ashley and Wildfire, and I get the easy part of this. Welcome. Thank you all so much for attending today. We're so happy to have you. I'm so excited for Ashley to share these 5 symptoms of ineffective branding, because often companies don't even know what they're doing wrong or what the symptoms are. So what I get to do is go through the agenda. And like Jonathan said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If you can't remember them for the end, I'll go ahead and keep a hold of those and we can go through them with Ashley at the very end. Jonathan, you did a wonderful job of introducing Wildfire, so we can even, skip the next slide where we meet Wildfire. So thank you for that. Then Ashley's going to walk you through the 5 symptoms of ineffective branding, the 5 pillars of effective branding to offset that ineffective branding, increasing your brand equity, and again, any questions, and then some next steps if you're interested. And I will turn it back over to Ashley. Take us away.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Wildfire. So Wildfire started as Intellitivity in 2013 with me at the helm. I cultivated my design skills at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia and began my career designing custom typefaces for brands like Merrill Shoes, Giant Bikes, Microsoft, and Disney. I transitioned into the nonprofit space as the youngest board member of Sisters U, and then my success there, ultimately led me to launch my business. In 2023, we celebrated 10 years in business and contributed to the development of more than 50 brands nationwide. So we decided to give Intellitivity a new name and a new look, and the Wildfire brand was established to represent all our branding company has to offer. So 5 symptoms of ineffective branding. Now, before I jump in, I'd like to take a minute because words like branding, marketing, graphic design, and logo design get interchanged a lot. I blame the AIGA, but that's another webinar. So we like to speak of branding in terms of alignment. Ultimately, the goal is to attract business. Feel how effortless that sounds. Attract business that is completely aligned with yours. So when we're talking about ineffective branding, we're really talking about the brand imagery, the voice or navigation, vehicles like marketing and advertising, the graphic design and logo design are all part of your branding. And so when we're talking about ineffective branding, we're talking about when that is misaligned or you're communicating in a way that is not attracting what you want. So first, if you're regularly attracting clients who are not aligned with your values, now this may show up as clients often refer business to you that is not a good fit. Potential customers often ask you to provide services or products that you do not provide. You are consistently being asked by current clients to provide products or services that are outside of your core capabilities. The second is potential customers often have trouble understanding your value. Now, this may show up as you consistently attract clients for whom your products or services are too expensive. You consistently have clients who micromanage you and or pick apart your products or work. And then the main reason people claim for not working with you is that you are too expensive. The third reason or the third symptom is your current customers hire others to perform services or purchase products that you do or provide. For example, you may have a design business, and this has happened to me when I was first starting out and my brand was not as buttoned up as I would have liked it to be. You have a design business and someone hires you to do the branding, and then a few years later, they hire someone else to design their website. Or let's say you sell cupcakes and you have a customer who stops in every week to buy one, and then they have their child's first birthday party and they hire someone else to make those cupcakes for the birthday. Or perhaps you have a very successful consulting business, so you decide to create a downloadable resource to generate passive income. But once you upload it to your site, no one downloads it. 4, you have difficulty attracting or retaining employees. Now, this may show up as job postings on various platforms receive very few applications or engagement. They may also attract individuals who are not a good fit for your company. You may have employees who often stay with your company less than a year. And then when an employee you have extended an offer to is offered a position with another company, they often don't choose you. So I'd like to kind of add to this just by saying, while attracting and retaining employees may be more difficult in some industries, and certainly during massive swings in the economy like we saw around 2020, but branding has become increasingly relevant when prospective candidates are looking for employment. Candidates need to believe that the work you're doing aligns with their values. And your company has the ability to provide them with a lasting paycheck that is worthy of the time they are giving you. So the fifth symptom is dissatisfied or underperforming sales professionals. Now, this may be showing up for you as your sales cycle is longer than many of your competitors, or your sales team has a high turnover rate, or your messaging varies widely among team members. So we saved the best for last for this one, because this is really one of the most visible signs of ineffective branding, because your customers and or potential customers are going to be more honest with your sales professionals than they are with you. In addition, whether it's you doing the sales or whether you have a team of professionals doing the sales, your sales teams are a wealth of customer feedback because they're always present when the customer says no, even if that no is radio silence. In response to all of that experiential knowledge, your sales team is responsible for their own success, which means they're paying attention to what is winning business for other customers and may become frustrated if they aren't given the tools they need to be successful. Some of our most successful customers with Wildfire are businesses that were founded by former sales representatives. Okay, so now I know what you're thinking. Great. Now that I know all the things I'm doing wrong, What do I do about that? And so I also know as being a business owner myself, who didn't start with a lump sum of cash, that it can be really tough to figure out who to turn to when you're first getting started. So I've organized these pillars in terms of what you should tackle first and encourage you to start where you are. And view branding as a tool. A lot of business owners like to compare themselves to other businesses and say, well, company X has a logo that they got on Fiverr and they're successful. And the first thing I want to point out is, just like you have no idea how happy that perfect couple is on Instagram, you have no idea how successful someone else's business is. The second point is that, again, just like on Instagram, you have no idea how many hours it took that photographer to get one perfect picture of those 5 toddlers smiling at the camera. You have no idea how hard that business is working or how much they're spending to acquire new business. Effective branding is a tool designed to make it easier for you to attract and retain business. For example, and I use this a lot when I'm talking, to new clients. If you want to build a house, you could buy the land with no money. You could dig up the whole backyard with your bare hands. I've seen videos on YouTube where some men can do it with a stick, right? Look it up. It wouldn't cost you much, but would take a long time and a lot of effort. So we call that doing it yourself. So for a little bit more, you could buy a shovel and it would take less time, but it would still be a significant amount of effort. We call that Fiverr. Or you could invest in a backhoe and get it all done in an afternoon with minimal effort. We call that hiring a professional. So that's really the way we want you to see branding. Okay, so the number one pillar, and the reason why this is the number one pillar is because it is the hardest thing to change later. Okay, so, and I did it, and it's scary, and you got to change your bank accounts, and you got to change, all of your registrations and your email addresses and everything. So the one thing that I would say to new businesses, if you're going to spend any money on anything for starting out, naming is what you should take a look at. Now, the criteria we use to evaluate the efficacy of a brand name are based on brain science. It's based on, how well is that person going to be able to relate and remember the name of your brand? And so some of those items that we use to decide that are syllables. 3 or less is ideal. Pronunciation, if you need an accent to know how it's pronounced, then it's not the best option. Shared experiences. Is this name something that most of your target audience has experiences with? And then is it stimulating? Does this name activate all 5 senses? So again, I talk about that brain science. It's a known fact that the more senses that are engaged when someone talks to you about a name, the more likely they are to remember it. So when you think of your brand name, can you taste it? Can you touch it? Can you see it? Can you hear it? Can you smell it? Think apple, right? Everyone knows how that tastes. Most people know how that tastes. I'll say that. You can touch it, right? You can feel it. You know what it feels like. You can see it. When someone says apple, there's an image that comes to your brain. You can listen to the sound that it makes when you bite into it, and then you can smell it. Right? You can smell that apple pie baking in the oven, or maybe just the apple itself. All this works to make sure that, the customer that you're meeting at that very first impression remembers your name. And then meaning or context. Is the meaning or context of this name dynamic and draw back to your brand ideals? Okay, second, visual identity. And so this is what people usually think of when we talk about brand, but you'll see it's really just one of the pillars. So that is your logo. Is it unique and meaningful? And I don't mean unique and meaningful to you, although that's really important as well. You really want it to be unique and meaningful to your target audience in terms of alignment. Many companies make the mistake of using professionals who niche in a certain industry to develop their brand. or they choose an in-house team. And although these may seem like logical options, doing so often leads to a brand that is not unique. It is much better to hire a branding firm and let an in-house or niche team use the brand guide to develop additional assets. That's really where you're going to leverage the expertise of the creative and unique ideas. And then your imagery, photos and colors. Invest in a professional photographer. And do that early on. In terms of capabilities, I always like to say start where you are. So you can always hire a design student or a local photographer now, someone that you can afford, just to do your headshots and do some basic shots. And then approach Annie Leibovitz down the road. Icons and illustrations should utilize your brand colors and reinforce your values. For instance, if diversity and inclusion is a priority for you, make sure your iconography reflects that. And I like to say this note because obviously we're living in a much different time than we were 20 years ago. And so a lot of standard stock iconography does not include women, people of color, ranges of sexual orientation, or it reinforces patriarchal, sexist, and racist stereotypes. If your budget limits you to using standard stock photography and you don't have, huge budget to develop custom illustrations, and you're using royalty-free assets, just be aware of this and consider using imagery that does not include interpretations of people. Your website or social. Now, everyone looks at this as like probably the biggest chunk of your marketing budget, and it's important. And the reason why it's important is because your website is a tool. Again, we want to use that tool to do business the way to make it easier for you to attract and retain business. But if you don't have money for a big website, you can start with a small one. If you don't have money for a small one, start with a web page. But at the very least, ensure that your social pages are completely filled out and represent your brand. So for those who already have a website and consider investing in UX and UI, use it as a tool to gather data. That probably right now is like one of the most powerful tools that you can use for your website. I like to talk about Google Analytics as the QuickBooks for your marketing. So if you're having some type of marketing initiative, or you're doing in-person meetings, or you're showing up at a webinar, your Google Analytics should be capturing all of that. And if it's not, you're missing the opportunity to understand how people are interacting with you and change your strategy. You can also use it to communicate with your audience, educate your customer, and/or create passive income. And then the final piece of your visual identity is your collateral. So the reason why collateral is last on this list is because if I were to meet with you and you didn't have any of these things, I would say, okay, start with your logo and identity, really get that tight and buttoned up. Support it with icons, illustrations, and photography, right? And then get that website and social up and running and ready to go. From there, the next thing you're going to want to do is really focus on your collateral. And I try to work with my clients on identifying collateral that is unique to their processes and unique to their experience. For example, I work with a moving company, and they needed a bill of lading. So I'm going to say that most people are like, I don't even know what that is. But they needed it so that they could, have piece of paper and documentation that reinforced the legitimacy of their brand to their customers and their partners. And so if you're someone who uses specific forms, boxes, bags, receipts, envelopes, labels, invoices, sales decks, application and admission forms, and some of those things don't cost any money, right? It's just recognizing that, you're using QuickBooks anyway and making sure that your identity is reflected there with your brand colors and your brand. And we've done that before too. I had a client who came to me and said, our QuickBooks invoices are not representing our brand. And if you're a brand strategist on this call, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because they've got this ridiculous little space to put the logo and the address in. It comes with standard colors that are usually some, flow of black and white. And oftentimes the typeface doesn't even, sit properly within the grid. And so you're looking at it and you're like, wow, this looks really unprofessional, but my hands are tied. Well, so we had a customer reach out to us and say, is there anything you can do about this? And because, we have a significant web development background, we were able to log into the QuickBooks, utilize the settings to completely brand the invoices. And so now every invoice that comes from that business looks like it's custom developed. And I'm sure that a lot of their customers don't even realize they're using QuickBooks. So anyway, when you're looking at your visual identity, make sure your brand shows up everywhere that you do. It will really go to reinforce your brand values. All right, messaging and content. So mission and vision. It's important for people to know why you're doing what you're doing and how you envision that taking place. Your belief. So this is, again, a little bit of brain science. We spend money because it makes us feel good, and we choose to do business with businesses who are aligned with our values. We choose to work with businesses we have things in common with, where they have similar goals and belief systems. So putting your belief system out there and spending some time really understanding, what you believe as a business or, as an organization really goes a long way to aligning your business with customers or clients that are a good fit. Core values. What are the pillars that drive how you conduct business? Does your team know them? Do your customers know them? So at Sisters U, when we were part of the organization, the first thing we really did was this. We decided on a mission and vision. We, developed, our belief systems and our core values. But one of the things that we also implemented was saying our mission and vision and our core values at the beginning of every meeting. So our members knew what the mission and vision and core values were because they heard it so often. You'll see this in magazines like Magnolia, where they have their mission statement at the end of each publication. So taking a minute to really understand, what the mission and vision believe, the mission and vision and the belief systems mean to your customers, but then also to your team. Brand voice. And so brand voice is, I think, the component that confuses people sometimes. They're like, okay, great. So I've got my mission and vision. I've got my belief system. I've got core values. What the heck is brand voice? So brand voice is how are you speaking and what words are you using so that your customer knows you believe in these values. And so your brand voice is something that is going to reverberate through all of the content. So whether it's a social media post, or whether it's a website content, your brand voice is going to support you as you grow. Because when you start, growing your organization and you start getting more business, you're going to want to reach out to individuals who can write content for you or who can post social for you. And so being able to give them a complete deck that includes brand voice is going to make sure that your messaging remains consistent across all platforms. Okay, so visibility. So all the great business ideas and branding in the world are not going to be successful if no one knows about it. In the branding world, you have to think of it like the tree falling in the forest. If there's no one to see it or hear it, does it make a sound? The answer in this case is no, absolutely not. So if you have a great website and there's no traffic, or a stack of business cards that you never take out of the box, then it's just like an Allen key that's sitting on your desk. It's not going to build an IKEA cabinet unless you pick it up and use it. Since we are a strategic branding agency, we don't just want to know if you're showing up, but also where you're showing up and how you're showing up. And the question I usually ask is, are you showing up in places where your customers who are aligned with your business are paying attention? And so this is, are you showing up, not like, are you showing up in the places where your customers are, right? Because that's a different question. It's, are you showing up in places where customers who are aligned with your business are paying attention? And so a great example of this is, advertising in publications and programs. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to advertise in this publication because there's this many people who are purchasing this publication, right? So while you may have those individuals showing up to take a look at that program, the information they're really interested in is the meat of that publication or the meat of that program, right? Who's here? Where's the name of my son and daughter? Those types of things. And they're often glossing over the ads in that program. But you know who will be saving that program and looking that program and keeping that in their desk and reviewing it? The people who also have ads in that program. So if you're trying to show up in the places where your customers who are aligned with your business are paying attention, you're going to want to look at where other advertisers are advertising in that scenario. And so we really do try to evaluate your visibility and understand, are you showing up in the places where your customers who are aligned with your business are paying attention? The good news is that we have more tools than ever to utilize data and pinpoint where your customer is and increase your visibility in extremely efficient ways. So in terms of visibility, we want to take a look at geography, right? Are you, showing up in the places where the, people are? Your target market, are you showing up in the places where your target customer is aligned? And if you're someone who hasn't necessarily niched, or you're working in lots of different industries, take a look at your current client list and try to draw connections in between one client and the other, or take a look at your 5 top clients and try to understand, how are they similar, how are they different? Your brand strategy, so understanding the different components from these pillars and how they all work together to raise your visibility. And then your marketing and advertising. Now, obviously, there are a litany of choices when it comes to marketing. If you're just starting out, digital tends to be the most affordable, followed by print and so on. As a business, you should always be marketing at the level you can afford. And this reminds me of a story. So I had a good friend and she was running for office, and I went to go help her at the polls to, just hand out information and, make sure everybody, who had questions could ask them. And there was this father who was walking out of the, voting area. And so he walked by and he's holding his daughter's hand, and she says, "Dad, when can we vote again?" And he's like, "Well, not for another 4 years." And I said, oh, because in Pennsylvania, we vote every year for something, whether it's municipal or state or national. And so I said, "Oh, no, we vote every year." And he was like, "Oh, you're right. We do. We vote every year." And I was having so much fun at that point. So I just called out to the big line of people who are waiting to vote. And I said, "When do we vote in Pennsylvania?" And everybody's like, "Every year." And I'm like, "I can't hear you." And they're like, "Every year." So that is a tool that we use for marketing. So, it really relates, because you should be marketing every year. You shouldn't just spend money on your brand and forget it, or spend money on your website and forget it. You should allocate a budget, even if it's a small budget, every year to growing brand equity. And then, as a rule of thumb, print legitimizes your business, and digital allows you to create more impressions on a budget. So you should be using a marketing mix that is tailored to your business. If you meet with a marketing person who says print is dead, or digital is entirely ineffective, then you're probably not speaking with someone who has your best interests in mind, which can sometimes happen. I mean, we all have, and not maliciously, I think we all as business owners are looking way to be more productive and more efficient. And sometimes we meet with individuals who, aren't really a good fit for the processes we have in place. But just understand, from like a marketing perspective, you have marketing individuals who are in that place too. They may have, a secret sauce or a set of processes that they know how to do well, and they can deliver those for you. But if that's the case, and you really, place a high value on that, make sure that you're also bolstering that with, some other avenues to really create the right marketing mix for your business. Okay. And then the other thing is the average potential customer needs 16 to 22 interactions in order to do business with you. We hear from potential clients sometimes that say, I tried sending out a mail piece before and I didn't get anything from it. So, in terms of visibility, you really want to be, hitting those customers, especially new customers, 16 to 22 interactions, whether it be a postcard or a phone call or an in-person meeting. Or multiple social media posts, or, following them back and liking them. You really want to try to get to that 16 to 22 interactions to generate data that is going to show you exactly how effective your marketing and branding is, and give you legitimate data. Okay, and then consistency. So this is something that you are always going to continue to improve. Technology and tools really help you do it. You want to be able to stay ahead of the market. So with all of those 4 other pillars, your logo and identity, your messaging, your frequency, and your advertising and marketing, you always want to work to maintain consistency. When it comes to your logo and identity, having a brand guide is super effective to making sure individuals who don't actually work within your business, or maybe your internal team knows who is not in branding, knows how to maintain consistency of your logo and identity. Your messaging is also super important. Just like I said, kind of reinforcing that brand voice, reinforcing your mission and vision, and saying it often and over is really helpful. And then frequency. So if you're sending a newsletter out, pick a schedule once a quarter or once a month. It always comes out at 10 a.m. It always comes out at 6 a.m. And what the frequency will do, being consistent with your frequency, will allow you to get better data and really help you to understand, hey, are people engaged at 10 a.m. or are they more engaged at 6 p.m.? Are most of my people up at 6 a.m. or do they want to see something every month? Do they want to see something every week? And then you can kind of lean on that data to make good brand decisions and maintain more consistency. For your advertising and marketing, again, you want to market in consistent places. So another thing that you want to think about is that, say you advertise it one place for 1 month, and then you're like, oh, well, I advertised there for a whole month, and I didn't get one reply, or I didn't get one lead from that. We're just going to shut that down. From an advertising and marketing standpoint, it really does take 6 months to generate enough data to decide whether something is working or not working. So you want to make sure that, as far as consistency is concerned, again, make sure it's, at a regular pace, and make sure you're advertising for a good 6 months to really get a flavor for how that piece is working for you, or how that change is working for you. Okay. So, increasing your brand equity. So we talk a lot about brand equity, and it's something that you build on. So when you start with your logo, and then you go to your website, and then you go to your advertising, essentially when we talk about brand equity, it's your name within the community, or your name within the circles, or your target audience. When you say it, when you say, say you're in the manufacturing industry, when someone says manufacturing, what's the first word you think of? When someone says soda, right? What's the first thing you think of? And, we think of those Coca-Colas and Pepsi because they have a lot of brand equity, because year over year, they're spending advertising dollars, and they're spending marketing dollars and branding dollars to continue to improve the efficacy of their brand. So even if you're running a smaller business, because obviously I don't think we have any CEOs from PepsiCo here, really increasing your brand equity and looking at it as something that you do year over year is super important, because it's going to increase the impact of all of the marketing that you're doing. Okay, so increasing your brand equity. And I'm going to say this again, start where you are. As a rule of thumb, for your first year, well-funded startups, rebrands, and product launches, I would put in the range of 50,000 to 75,000. And that's like, if you were sitting on a boatload of cash or you're working towards a boatload of cash and you really want to hit the ground running, in their first year, as a baseline, you're looking at, doing the branding, but then also doing website collateral, social content and templates, and then having your launch. Now, this number is a little high if you're a solopreneur and you're in a virtual space, so you don't have any signage or anything like that. And it's also a little low if your organization is 5 or more with a physical location. So, but you can use this as a gauge to say, well, I'm a solopreneur, so I should be under this number, or I am, I'm really trying to make waves and I've got I've got an organization of 10 that I have to be supporting. So I should be a little above this number. It really should give you an idea of like where the numbers come in and give yourself a plan. So everyone else, I would say 5 to 10% of your total sales. So if you're just starting out and you have nothing, right, then I would say, imagine what you want your first year of sales to be, and then try to get as close to that 5% as you can. And like I said, this is, something that grows. This is your brand equity that you continue to build. So start where you are. If where you are is, hey, I need to, brand, my social platforms. I'm going to be a designer that tells you to go to Fiverr, but if all you can afford is that naming session to really get your name down, and then you go to Fiverr and get that first logo so that next year so that you can get business, and then next year you do your brand, then that's what you do. But just remember that, your branding is a tool. So, when you're working with Fiverr, you're using a shovel. So let's try to get to the point where, year over year, you really do work towards purchasing that backhoe and hiring a professional to really leverage, all that you're capable of. Okay. And then increasing your brand equity second year and every year after. Like I said, branding is something that you should do every year. So to maintain your market share, Forbes says 5 to 10% of your total sales. If you're not there yet and you feel like 5% or 10% of your total sales is a lot, bite off the biggest chunk that you can chew. And go from there. And then if you're really looking to increase your market share, Forbes says 20% or more of your total sales. So something that you also have to remember is that branding is not an expense. It is an investment. Every dollar you spend should get you closer to your goal and build brand equity. And if your current branding partner isn't modifying your strategy, if you're not getting closer to your goals afterwards, then drop us a line and schedule a brand audit, and we'll help you identify areas where you can be more effective. Okay, so I know that was a lot. And I know we ran through it quickly, and 1 hour isn't really a huge amount of time for a workshop, but I would love to open it up now to any questions.
And for what it's worth, Ashley, I do have our first question, which is a wonderful 3-parter from Jonathan. And that's in the chat. And then after our first question, if you want to raise your hand and ask your question directly, feel free to do so. How you do so is at the bottom of your screen, there's a reactions button. It's a little smiley face with a plus sign. And you can click that, and then it has the option to raise your hand, and we'll call on you. So Ashley, our first question. Number 1. Is it really important to highlight your vision, since this is about what I want versus about being about the audience?
Jonathan, why don't you clarify that question, that initial question for me?
So, I view, mission statement is your beliefs, and vision is the impact that you want to happen in the future and how you want customers to perceive you at some future date, what you want to look like in the future. Mm-hmm. What I want my business to look like in the future seems very, it's what I want. It's me. It's self-centered on me. It's not centered on the audience. And so I tend to want to stay away from things that talk about me, instead of focusing on things that are purely based on what my audience needs and desires and beliefs are. So I wrote, so is it really important to highlight that, since,
That's a great question. And again, it just drives back to what your strategy is, right? So your vision is super important to your team, right? If you're not clear about who you are and and what you want to see happen, then it's likely that you're going to feel some disconnection within your team. And so whether, you're looking to acquire new team members in a certain section of your website or your branding materials, then that's probably where I would say that belongs. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the superstar of the show on your website if the overall strategy for your website is to acquire more customers, leads, etc.
So that semi-answers the second part of the question, Ashley, which is on a website, how prominent do you think mission statements should be? Should it be on the homepage?
Yeah. So again, that really depends on your strategy. And we really work to try to understand, exactly what your goals are over the course of 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, because that will change how you're using your website as that tool to deliver on the goals that you've set. So as far as your mission is concerned, if you're looking to grow partnerships, if you're looking to create collaborators, investors, that's where you will see that the mission becomes more of a prominent place. Essentially board of directors, right? Like if you're trying to attract top level board of directors, you're going to want to make sure that that mission is very tight, and that it's supported with different brand components, imagery, etc. Really, really keeping in mind that people communicate differently. So one of the reasons why brand, it's so important to have a brand name and then also a logo. And, if you really dive into it, there are brands with sounds, there are brands with tastes that are associated with them, right? The reason why you do that is because we are humans and we're on this, wide spectrum of how we learn and interpret things. And so, when you're putting together something, like a mission and you really want it to land, you have to be mindful that people learn in lots of different ways.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So mission, I look at it as, I'm expressing my beliefs, and it's important for me to express them to attract people who believe what I believe. So you have to tell them what your beliefs are for them to know that. But I'm always curious about, it's not something you really want to lead with, but it could be secondary. You want them to scroll to it, maybe.
Absolutely. And that can also it usually drives the brand voice. So you'll notice that a lot of these pillars are not mutually exclusive. They're components of all, that they all kind of are interwebbed. And so when you develop a brand and you hire a good brand strategist, they will help you to leverage the tools to tell your story in the way that's going to create the most impact for you.
Very good. And the last part of that question is, do you think there should be about us sections on a website? Isn't it better to say about you?
That's a good question. And I know that there's a lot of, there's a lot of pushback from, the marketing perspective. They want to say, oh, well, everything should be geared towards the audience and who that audience is and those types of things. Although I do believe that, spending some time talking about who you are is super relevant. And it's also a place in people's minds where, they get to your website and they're looking for that. They're like, oh, let's click the about us, because they're just so used to seeing it. And so you're kind of filling in that blank. So we encourage our businesses to talk about themselves in terms of what does the customer care about. So when you say about me, and that the customer is there for a specific reason, right? They're there to get information. They're there to see if you align with their values. And you've already done the research to understand what your target market, what their values are. You say about us when they get to that page in a way that reinforces what they're hoping to see when they get there, if that makes sense. So it's not like about us. I, graduated preschool and I, went to University of the Arts and, I won a citation for my senior thesis and I worked with all of these major companies and I, did all of those things, right? It's, saying about us in a way that's like, I'm capable of delivering what you want from me.
And some supporting remarks from Karen and Joe for that. An about section builds credibility and authenticity. And how important is that the brand connotates what we do. Did I read that correctly, Joe?
Pretty much, it goes back to branding. If you have a logo or something of that, or a brand that you're trying to develop, how important is it that because we're all not Nike with a swoosh.
So that's a great question. So Nike is effective from a brand science perspective. And, I've been leaning on myself to do this interpretation of an exhibit that is at the Franklin Institute, which is here in Philadelphia. And it's in their brain science section. And it shows you what your brain is capable of understanding in a split second, and then after 5 seconds, and then after 10 seconds, and then so on. So while the swoosh, right, is simplistic in nature, it all reaches back to those brand ideals and the brain science. Now, what I will also say is that, we're looking at branding as a tool, and you really don't know how much money someone is spending or how hard they're working to get those brands to be successful. And so, in some cases where you see an extremely large organization who is using maybe a less than effective brand or a brand, that, you think isn't really coming from a very thoughtful place. Sometimes it's just that they have the ability to spend lots and lots of money on marketing. And so what I like to call branding is the great equalizer, because small businesses can hire individuals to create effective brands, and it allows them to spend less money on their marketing and advertising and align more quickly with businesses to help them be successful.
Thank you, Ashley. So another question that came in from Joe as well, SEO and word search investments and your thoughts.
SEO, word search investments. Again, that's really going to have to, go back to your strategy. And like who your target audience is. Do I think SEO can be effective? Absolutely. Do I think word searches can be effective? Yes. But you really have to look at it in terms of, how much your budget is, where your target audience is paying attention. And then also, taking a look at, if that space is super crowded for you or not. For some industries, especially if you tend to be the unicorn in the market, you do have the ability to, to take advantage of word search in a way that some other people don't. But if you're in an industry where lots of people are already using, particularly word searches, it can be, that might not be the most strategic way to get your message across.
Pitch changing suggestion from Rich is using the word investment over project fees or costs was a game changer for my business. I learned that lesson about a decade ago, and it was a game changer in positioning my value offered. Thanks for mentioning that.
Thanks, Rich.
And then we have from Pierce, what are the differences between branding for business to business versus business to customer or consumer?
Okay, so business to business versus business to consumer. So business to business, a lot of times you're looking at a larger percentage per sale. I should say a larger number per sale, because sometimes those, for example, we have a customer who, if they land new business, it can mean $25,000 for them. And so obviously they're going to spend a little bit more upfront to really build those relationships. So you're looking at relationship building as opposed to volume. And so when you're looking at targeting, B2C for the most part, you're really looking at trying to focus more heavily on increasing that visibility and increasing the volume.
Thank you. This question is from Alex. What do you recommend with respect to print marketing? Printed newsletters, brochures, cards, postcards, etc.
So this is where, we encourage business owners to invest in a strategic way. Take a look at how you do business. If you're someone who consistently does business digitally. So for example, we work with a company that does cybersecurity. They work with organizations in the defense industrial base. And a lot of those individuals, are open to doing, the webinar, the slide deck, the branded core capabilities, those types of things. And so we really work on ebooks and digital materials for them, from, a branding and identity perspective, and also, from an advertising perspective. So there they do very little print marketing. But what I will say is that, kind of reaching back to earlier in the conversation, it legitimizes your business. So bringing things into reality has a very, it has a very grounding and visceral feeling from a brain science standpoint. And so if you have the ability to, follow up a webinar with a print thank you, or you have the ability to, get individuals more engaged with sending them like a care package or a thank you package that includes materials and just lets you know that you appreciate them, especially if, your margins are higher and you can really afford to do it with your top 10 or 15, clients. It really does go a long way to solidifying that relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Casey. You mentioned that visitors to your website are there to see if we align with their values. What % of website visitors actually do this? And do you have research to support this?
So I can certainly look at, other areas where, we haven't done independent research on our own, but we can certainly look at other areas where, other individuals, Forbes, Business Insider, et cetera, that talk about this. But the reason why branding is so important, those colors, pictures, et cetera, is that 90% of people make a snap judgment in the first 5 seconds. So whether it's someone who takes the time to sit down and read your website, or whether it's someone who just gets there and sees the pictures, or whether it's someone who is doing research for someone else and saying, yes, you should take this meeting with this person, or no, you should not take this meeting with this person. That is something that we all do as human nature. It's the reason why we struggle so much with judgment in our culture, because our brains are wired to keep us safe, right? And look for the good things. And so based on our past experience, we all have those areas of our brain that are saying, no, don't do that. That's scary. And no, don't. And yes, please do that because that was so fun last time. Well, so after being, marketed to essentially since birth, the more clear you are about your communication with your communication tools, the more likely you are to have people self-select whether they're a good client for you, which means you don't have to do the work of developing the proposal or educating the client or convincing them that you're a good fit. They're essentially walking in knowing you're a good fit, and then you just have to prove them right, which means it reduces the length of time in your sales cycle.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. I know we have just a minute left. I wanted to see if you wanted to go on to next steps, and then if people can hang around, we have a couple more questions.
Okay. So next steps. So we're extending an exclusive offer for CollaborX members. Feel free to schedule your 30-minute brand audit to identify holes in your brand strategy, recognize inconsistency in your visual assets and messaging, and create a personalized plan to increase your brand equity in 2023. I've included the Calendly link there. I will go ahead after this and send out a follow-up that includes that link if anybody is interested. And then I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to do this, for taking your time to show up, because I know everyone is so busy and stretched these days. It's really important to us that you made the time for us today. So the entire team at the Wildfire would like to thank you for attending our webinar series, session 1. For information on how to effectively brand your business or check out other brands we've developed, please visit wildfirecode.com.
So
Thank you all
thank you
so
so
much.
much, Ashley. So Ashley has agreed to just stay for a few more minutes to answer some leftover questions. Ashley, if you could, yes, I was going to say, could you unshare?
Yes.
Everyone, if you could look up, I want to take a picture. So smile. Okay. Show us how much fun you had. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. So you'll take a few more questions. And there was one thing that I left out and I wanted to get to before the end. It was actually the most important part of Ashley's bio that I left out, which is, do you know that her finger painting is on the wall of her principal's office at her preschool?
I didn't even know that.
That's key to this whole thing. Since she was, how old are you in like 3?
Yeah, well, it gets even
That was
weirder.
really the beginning of all this.
Yeah, it gets even weirder because when I was a kid, and it's one of those things that you don't realize till you get older, like how weird it was because you were just a kid and doing things that you thought were fun, right? And so I lived in a development, which was kind of like, around here, we have Levittown. And it was like one of the first, housing developments. And so everybody moved in at once and all had kids at once. So that was my experience. I grew up in like a neighborhood full of kids my age. And so me and my girlfriends, we decided we were going to start a business. I think I was 11 at the time. And because we wanted to build a clubhouse in the back of my friend's yard. So we would literally I would leave the house in the morning, and this was, over the summer, I would leave the house in the morning. I would go to my friend's house. We'd go in her basement. And then we'd plot to plan, this clubhouse that we were building. And then we also developed, things we could do to make the money to make it happen. Right. And so in our heads, we're like, oh, we're going to make all this money. Right. So I started a newsletter and distributed it around my neighborhood. We held a play, we had a bake sale. We did all of these entrepreneurial things. Right. And so it's so funny because after I graduated art school, I resisted being an entrepreneur so much. And now that I look back at it, I'm like, oh, it was all there. Right. So
Really, really great.
Okay. So you showed a number for branding. If you are unsure of what amount you will have, if you're a startup, what's the first dollar you would spend your money on?
Naming, I think that's something that people don't invest in, and then it costs you on the back end. We experienced that recently because it's super scary, having to transition everything over. It's a super heavy lift. And so a lot of people, you come up with it in their backyard, or, they're talking to friends, and then they just kind of come up with something. And then you don't realize until your team starts trying to use it, that it's, causing a lot of miscommunication. And so that's the first piece. Hire a brand strategist to do your naming session.
And we have done naming sessions, so we think it would be a great investment. See what I did there, Rich? Did you see that? So the next question, since the top of a homepage is so important, what messaging should we focus on? Create emotional connections or express benefits, or both?
So create emotional connections. That's, that drives everything we do. Even for people who are super type A, they're driven by, their hippocampus. So, you also want to focus on, your unique selling proposition in that first sentence. So that should be some distillation of, your belief system and what you do. And then try to pull in a really strong image, something that really, gets a reaction. That's where I would focus.
Okay. Now that we're down to a smaller group, do we have anyone that would like to ask a question directly of Ashley rather than putting in the chat?
Ashley, that was nice of you to mention the emotional connections, even though Kevin logged off. So
Oh, yeah, Kevin is, a partner, a true partner in this, because obviously, we don't always, jump into things, thinking we can come up with all of the ideas on ourselves. And Kevin and I have definitely worked, together before, creating solutions for clients.
Very good. Well, I think that wraps up all the questions that were in the chat. Ashley, there are plenty of thank yous, and there's some supporting comments to what you said, reaffirming what you said. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. We really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure.
everyone,
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Great,
I'm
thank you so
thrilled
very
to have
much.
the opportunity.
really, thank you so much, everyone. It's great to see you. Really good. Great job, Ashley and Shannon.
Thank you.
And I'll end the recording. Let's see.
Actually, you may want to take a moment just to go through
Yeah.
the chat, because there are some nice compliments for you
So
there.
I'll send you the chat.
Trying, like,
Oh,
where?
awesome.
There it is.
Yeah, I'll send the chat. I'll send, the recording. I'll send the people who registered, people that attended, everything. So I mean, there really were some great comments. So it was exactly what I had hoped for. We started at 12:05. We had 35 people, and then we hit 40. We've remained at 40 until 12:36, and then we lost one person, and that's about
Yeah.
it.
So nobody was like, man, this sucks.
Right? People.
I'm gonna
did-
leave.
Yeah, people did not. And there were a ton of questions, and
Yeah.
everyone stayed to the very end. It's a lot of material
Yeah.
in an hour.
You did a
Yes.
nice job condensing it into that hour, though.
Yeah, I was hoping that I wasn't flowing through it too fast. I did try to slow myself down a little bit, because I know I sometimes can just be like,
No, it was great. They did.
thank you both for your support. I really appreciate it.
No, really. And so you'll
Yeah.
get the recording, and then you could say, yeah, you could make this into a thing. So
Okay.
yeah, this really was helpful. I felt a little uncomfortable asking my questions, because, and I'll tell you why. Because Darcy's doing my rebranding,
Yeah.
and so
Oh, was she there? Was she in
Yes.
there? Oh, okay. I think she was there to evaluate me, though, because we just had our meeting on Monday, and she was like, oh, I'm so looking forward to seeing, your thoughts on this. So
yeah, so everything that I was asking are things like, because she did a design where I thought the vision was too prominent. So I said, I don't want it there. And we've been going back and forth a lot about the top of the homepage. So
Yeah.
still haven't settled on anything. So we'll see.
You'll
Yeah.
get there. You'll get there.
I'll get there. I know. But thank you. It was really great. Perfect. Exactly what we want these workshops to be. So
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for all the work you did getting it together. I appreciate it so much.
and I'm glad that I remembered to mention the
To
finger
rec-
painting.
Me too. Me too.
You have to
Best
throw
part.
that into your bio. I mean,
I
really.
guess I do. What's funny is that I recently did a video in the rebranding process, and I had them asking, is there anything exceptional? And that's where it's one of those things like gotta like phone a friend or ask the audience, right? Because like I don't always think of those things. And yeah, I should put that in there because I think it's a good segue.
I do too.
I really think you need a picture of it somewhere.
Yeah.
We go back.
Yeah, it had to be a really good finger painting. So
I remember that. I mean, I was 4 or something. I don't even know what it looks like.
So great.
okay. Thank you so
Jonathan, it was
much.
such a
Right.
pleasure meeting you.
Yeah,
Thank
it's great
you so
meeting
much.
you. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thanks. You do the
Okay.
same.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.